And I'm Crazy Susie.
And we are in the Eyes of Terror.
And we're going to try to start wrapping up this 13 Nights of October. We are on number 12.
And it is 2nd of November. Yes. Like we said before, we just got caught up with everything at the...
Well, on Halloween, I took my youngest niece trick-or-treating, and it was our anniversary. So we obviously weren't going to do any recording on Halloween. So we're going to record our last two today and wrap it up for you guys.
So, let's do this.
The film we're going to do now is Hell House, LLC.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a documentary type film, one that I actually like.
You dislike mockumentaries or found footage. This one is the found footage. It's
right, and the way they did it, I don't know. It's done slightly different. So it's done in the essence to where you feel like you're watching a movie instead of you're just given the information. So maybe that's why I find it kind of interesting.
No, I think also it is a lot less shake cam.
Yeah, I mean the filming was done pretty well.
At least we didn't look up somebody's nostrils.
There was no snot cams, so that was pretty good. IMDb gives it a score of 6.4 out of 10, so that's pretty decent. It's listed as a horror mystery thriller. I could see that. It was originally produced in November of 2006 and was released in October of 2015. That is quite a big difference. It's 83 minutes long, and we watched it on Amazon Prime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The writer and director is Stephen Cognetti. It's also available on YouTube, iTunes, and Vudu. The cast list is Ryan Jennifer plays Sarah Hayville, Danny Benetti plays Alex Taylor, Gore Abrams plays Paul O'Keefe, Jared Hacker plays Tony Prescott, Adam Schneider plays Andrew McNamara, Alice Bacall plays Diane Graves, Phil Hess plays Joey, Lauren A. Kennedy plays Melissa, Jeb Krieger plays Martin Cliver. Those are the main characters that you see actually putting the haunted house together and all of that. The summation of the film is 5 years after an unexplained malfunction caused the death of 15 tour goers and staff on the opening night of a Halloween haunted house tour. A documentary crew travels back to the scene of the tragedy to find out what really happened. They find out. But I don't think they like what happened.
No.
So, as we did last time, we're going to kind of just give our view of it and hit the highlights.
Mm-hmm. We're
not going to bore you with all the finite details. And I really do like this film. I like the way they did it. Like I said, they don't really do it in a mockumentary way. I don't think... They do it more of in a movie format, but they do show you footage from the actual haunted house and what happened and everything. But the way they format it is more interesting than just like a documentary type film.
And then they do have interviews and stuff in it with experts or whatever you want to call it, like a local historian and a guy who went into the house and stuff like that after everything that happened, trying to piece together what happened in there.
Right, a local historian who knew the history of the house, and yeah.
So I actually want to know more about the history, like more. And I heard there is a sequel to this, so maybe I'm hoping they go more into depth about that. But supposedly, the guy was a Satan worshiper.
Yeah.
And he used the house to do sacrifices or something like that. And then ever since then, nobody could really have have a business in there. Like everything went to pot. Because you can't say that it would. Stuff looked pretty modern, especially in the kitchen.
Right.
Like the racks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are still pretty modern looking. So, and the wine cellar, it had enough wine. It had a lot of wine in it, but.
Right. So the original owner, the historian says, was a Satan worshiper, and after several reports of individuals never leaving his hotel, or that's the last known whereabouts, and them end up missing, even though he was able to produce documentation stating that they did leave his hotel, but, they later came up missing or whatever. So he got bad publicity for his business, and his business ultimately failed.
Did they give a timeline, though? Like, I don't remember a timeline. For some reason, I was thinking early 1900s, but I don't know why.
Yeah, I think so. It was around
because
that time.
I mean, I guess it didn't look like that to me. Like it looked like there was another business in there after that. I'm just saying.
No, there was. So what happened, because of all that bad stigma on his business, he lost a lot of business. The hotel did, the original owner. And he succumbed to the pressure of everything, his business going downhill and all, so he kills himself. He hangs himself in the dining room of the hotel. And, the business gets sold through multiple people, and people end up, anytime somebody stays there for an extended period of time, they end up seeing ghosts and strange things happen. So the whole town has these stories or legends about this hotel, about it being haunted and all of that. And the main guy that wanted to purchase this hotel, Alex, he knew about this, and he didn't tell the other individuals that went in to help him fix this hotel up and everything.
They were all friends for years. They were friends. He's a really crappy friend, to be honest.
Right, and this isn't the first time they've done this. This is something they've done at multiple locations. They get a property, they turn it into a haunted house, they make it successful, they move on to the next property, they do it again. This is something they do as a group multiple times. They've done it multiple times in multiple different cities. So he knows the history of this place and the stigma surrounding it, and he doesn't tell anybody.
Yeah. So isn't the name's Abaddon, right?
Abaddon, yeah.
Okay. Do you know Abaddon is actually the name of a lesser demon in hell?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, even the name alone is lesser demon of hell house.
Yeah, so they end up naming their haunted house Hell House.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The original name of the hotel was Abaddon. So, yeah. That doesn't scream Satan worshippers at all.
Yeah. I just thought that was interesting. The name Abaddon is lesser demon. Yeah. So, I mean, the restaurant's interesting looking. I mean,
the kitchen. Yeah.
The kitchen. The dining room. It almost looked like it was an Italian restaurant at one point.
Well, the entire hotel is interesting because it has a hidden wall that you can open up and go into the kitchen, and it has a lot of these really strange things. In the basement, it has this almost hidden walkway where you could actually exit out of the house through cellar doors. So the house has that weird 1900s escape routes in the house. So,
well, it's sort of, this whole sort of thing, the whole sort of setup with the hotel, some of the weird stuff that is in the hotel, like you were saying, the weird escape route and stuff like that. It's very H.H. Holmes-esque, where H.H. Holmes would have hidden walls and stuff too. And
Yeah.
when he had his hotel in Chicago, so I just wonder if they took a lot of that, transported it to somewhere on the East Coast.
Well, this was done in New York. Alex mentions that. He said, well, we did this in the city in New York, and this is in the country.
Yeah.
So it was done somewhere in,
Well,
the country. of New York.
like with everything, New York is not just New York City.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So they videotape everything. They want to document everything. The experience of them fixing the place up, opening night, all of it. They document everything. Well, the movie actually starts out with a news crew that comes in because this journalist comes in 5 years after all of this happens, and she wants to document and try to figure out exactly what happened, because nobody really knows exactly what happens. And Sarah, one of the main people involved in the whole fixing up the haunted house and everything, she gives her a whole bunch of videotapes, which was their documentation of the whole experience, the group's documentation. She just gives it
because
to her.
Sarah's the only sole survivor
Right.
of this whole experience that happened. I mean, out of the original crew.
Right, out of the original crew. So the group decides to move into the hotel because upstairs are rooms, and they're going to have the haunted house on the main level and the basement level of the hotel. So they move in upstairs. That way they're on location. They can work during the day and get everything fixed up and not have to go to separate locations to sleep and all of that.
So one thing sort of bothered me. They had the mattresses, but they didn't have any frames. And it's like, it's an old hotel.
Oh, Paul is the only one that didn't have a frame. Alex's bedroom had a mattress and frames.
Okay, so
Paul's
I was just thinking of 2C. That's all.
that bedroom did have a frame.
Oh, I didn't think it did.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so
So like I said, they videotape everything, and once they start staying the night, after a few nights, some really weird stuff starts happening, like strange
yeah,
things.
I mean, but it's period, and I like it because it's subtle, but there are points within the movie where it just sort of gets monotonously boring. I don't want everything to be jump out, scare me, but it's interesting to see the conflict, but you get tired of the conflict also. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, we get it, you're all losing it because of weird stuff's happening, but
Yeah.
I mean,
A lot of these things happen during the night while they're sleeping. So the haunted house members were woken up during the night by really loud, weird noises. One night, they were woken up to find Sarah downstairs just babbling and talking to a picture. Like there's a tapestry that's framed on the wall, and she's staring at it and just babbling nonsensical things.
well, that's sort of her MO, is to stare at things and talk to them, because she does it again later on.
But nothing she said really made sense, and it took them a while to get her attention and help her go back upstairs. So they go to help her go back upstairs, and they see one of these mannequin clowns that they have in the basement standing in the corner.
And supposedly these mannequin clowns they can't turn their heads, they really can't do anything.
Like they're stiff jointed mannequin clowns. Their neck doesn't move, their joints are stiff, I mean, they're posable, but they can't move freely. You can pose them in what position you want them, but they're pretty stiff, crazy.
So it's just sort of like and they think it's one of their friends in the costume, I guess. And it's staring down like in the basement.
Yeah.
So the basement has some like weird things, like on the wall. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but on the wall, like in chalk, is like math problems. There's like numbers.
Yeah, and there was also a star and some other inscriptions.
Like, wasn't it like a pentagram?
Pentagram. And on the floor, when they first got there was like 5 or 6 Bibles turned upside down on the floor. It was weird. And when they went back upstairs, when they were upstairs trying to get Sarah to go back to bed, as they walked through the dining room, back through the dining room, candles on one of the tables were lit that weren't lit before. So weird things just happen.
But I mean, it's subtle horror. Like too, when Paul is talking on the camera, and if you look behind him, there's a red light in his doorway, and he's just like vlogging at this point, and you see a shadow, a relatively tall.
Yeah,
figure.
he thought one of his friends were sleepwalking or something.
But even before that, it happened prior, and he didn't even notice it.
Right.
And it's a tall figure. It's not like a woman's size or,
yeah.
You're the average male size, which a lot of them were. This guy was at least 6 foot something. And he's just like right there in that doorway with that red light. I thought that, it's just like you start to notice, you notice little things here and there.
Right, because he's all the time recording or looking into the camera talking. So if anything's in the background, you're going to see it. And he's not going to see it because he's looking at the camera.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I was saying. It's subtle. A lot of stuff is subtle. So you have to... This is one of those films you have to sort of watch to pick up on the little subtleties.
Yeah. And we've watched it several times, so... And I'm sure you didn't catch that the first time.
Mm-mm.
We caught it the one time that he caught it, but I don't think we caught it that it had happened multiple times.
Yeah.
And he didn't see it. Well, there's other things that happen too. Like they do a test run on their lights and everything. And so there's a hallway that they have all these mannequins and stuff set up, and they have a couple of monsters. And so they turn the lights off, they turn their strobe on, and he's recording, and these monsters keep moving closer to him.
But I mean, the thing with, I like it because it uses strobe, because strobes are very deceitful. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes even if something's stationary, your mind makes up that they're moving because of the way the light is, obviously how the strobe is working.
Right.
So sometimes your mind fills in things.
But he had used his walkie-talkie and asked Alex how many monsters there was supposed to be, and he said 3, and there was like 4 or 5 of them, and they all kept getting closer to him. So he freaks out and he starts banging on the door for him to let him in, and nothing happens. So he ends up jumping over the counter and going a different route to get out, and then explains to him what happened. And he had it all on video. It's not like anybody could dispute what he said. He had it on video.
Well, they had everything on video. I mean, that was the whole point. And it sort of irritated me that they're all starting to be like, no, this is not happening stuff.
And another incident had happened to where he saw one of the clowns or whatever in the hallway. He walked past it, and it was in the hallway, and it had turned its head. He saw it turn its head. And then he thought it was that other guy. I can't think of his name. Tracy or something. Anyway. Yeah. And he walked into the next room, and he was standing there, and he was like, hold up. Weren't you in there? And he was like, dude, what are you talking about? So he goes back, and the clown isn't there anymore. He goes down in the basement, and the clown is sitting there beside the other 2 clowns in the basement, sitting down, propped up against the wall. Mm-hmm. And he examines it and everything, and it's the way it was before, nothing's wrong. And he goes back, and he, rewinds the footage and shows the Tracy dude on the footage, look, this is what happened, and they're all freaking out. But they still look at him like he's crazy. Well, then, 2 days before they were due to open the haunted house, Paul is laying in bed, asleep. He wakes up. The first thing he does is turn on his camera. This is because he records every single thing. So when he wakes up in the morning, the first thing he does is turn on his camera. Before he goes to bed, the first thing he does is record a message before he goes to bed. So he turns on his camera. He looks over and he sees this figure sitting on his floor with its back up against the wall. He freaks out, jerks the covers over his head, but the camera's still on.
Yeah, and doesn't it come and attack him? Or is that...
He waits a couple minutes, and he slowly pulls the covers up, and it attacks him,
Yeah.
Well, then he goes missing, and nobody can find him. And they finally do find him in the basement.
Well, see, I love, like, in every horror movie, at some point, somebody pulls that young kid, hide underneath the covers, hopefully a go away type thing. Every modern movie, at some point, has that.
Well, the thing is, they went down in the basement. Alex and Tracy did. And he wasn't in the basement. All the 3 clowns were sitting there. They saw their head moves again. Alex got freaked out, so he went into the furnace. They have one of them old-fashioned steel metal. You can feed stuff into it, but it's massive. Like, both of them fit into it. He went into the furnace, so Tracy followed him. I was thinking, this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
They went back out. They checked the clowns, and they were fine. And obviously, they weren't moving. And here's Paul, sitting on the other wall, just like in shock.
Yeah, drooling shock.
So they take him upstairs and put him to bed, and he just sleeps for hours, like 2 days. It's opening night, and he's still asleep.
So I think this is the beginning of the possession. Like, I have a theory that happens at the end, but like something obviously happened. You know, like down there that
because he's not himself. He's not acting normal, or he's acting like totally screwed up. So it's opening night. Everything seems to be going pretty smoothly, except for they're down a man. Obviously, Paul is in bed. Some of their walkie-talkies are acting funky, but, other than that, everything
and some of the cameras are flickering here and there.
Everything seems to be going pretty good. They get the first 2 or 3 groups going through, and everything's going smoothly. They get to about the 3rd or 4th group, and something happens. What happens?
Well, they're all in the basement, aren't they?
They get to about the 4th or 5th group of people.
And like, things start...
The basement gets backed up. People in the basement get freaked out.
Well, I mean, it's not just that, but I mean, it's like stuff started happening in the kitchen. Like little things happen in the kitchen. So, okay, so there's little things prior as they're going through that sort of bugged me. Like, they're filming. These onlookers, these patrons are coming in and filming, but they're also picking up like stuff. Like there's in the restaurant scene, there's like food, and they're picking it up and like, and that just really irritated me. Just don't do that, type thing. But okay, so they go into so the whole basement scene is this sacrifice chick.
She's tied up or chained up to the wall, and those clowns are in the basement. Well, they have one guy down there, Joey. He's a big guy, so they have him down there in a clown costume. He has the keys to unchain her, and he's down there to make sure that nobody tries to harm her. After the 4th or 5th group starts to go in, Joey books it. He runs out the front door.
Okay, so this scene really sort of bugs me just out of like, I was just thinking OSHA standards or, some sort of like the whole... So this chick, you assume if everything went right, her arms would be up over her head for 5 to 6 hours. Like cuffed, like over her head for a long period of time.
Right.
And it's just a pipe. No one's going to notice because it's dark and there's very little light. So why couldn't they just have a pipe that was big enough so she could stick both of her hands in there, give the illusion, but then is able to take them down? I know. Movie logic.
Right.
But, I mean, that just sort of bothered me. I'm like, everything up to this point was pretty realistic on how things were set up, but that one thing just sort of bothered me. But prior to this, you start seeing, like, really weird behaviors. Sarah is talking to a statue of Mary out in the garden, again, staring off into it, mumbling to it. And they've mentioned, like, look, she's at it again. What's going on? Paul, he's acting erratic.
He got out of bed and he's just like walking through the crowds of people and...
Well, I mean, what I'm saying even really sort of before that night is just everybody is like either on the last nerve of being around each other, or they're just, something else is going on. They're not talking. Like, none of them are getting any... It's like, I guess it's like if you're like in a group of people and you've been up for a week and you only get like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and at the end of that week, you're ready to just strangle everybody you're around because you just a short fuse.
Yeah.
And that's what this is reacting towards, because they've done this before. They've been in business for, and they've been friends for years. But even the local historian or one of those guys was saying like, well, the main guy was the leader, and everybody else was just going along because they didn't want to be there. But they didn't want to be there. They just went along because of their friendship. And I don't really think that was really the motivation for that either. Because even no matter how strong your friendship is, there's a point where you just get tired of each other. You're just like, dude, I gotta go. Or you're dead. One of the two.
Well, Alex was gonna leave.
Yeah.
And they talked him out of it. Because I guess... all of them had financially invested in this place. And it didn't really tell in the movie why exactly he didn't leave. But my assumption is that they invested, or the main guy invested everything they had in this place. So if it failed, they were all screwed, basically.
Yeah. But, I mean, they really didn't... It seemed like they didn't really do a lot. I mean, I just assumed that the property costs a lot. That's the only thing that I could assume.
I mean, it gives you hints all through it that they didn't really have a lot of money to do it with.
Yeah.
They spent the majority of the money on the sign. He didn't want to do any mechanical props.
Yeah, because, I mean, those things are expensive.
He didn't hire a bunch of actors.
Yeah, the one guy, he found like one or two, like one guy was just sort of like walking around, like he was he was a cook at the restaurant or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That they patroned at one point, and then one was like a security guard, I think, down at a bar or something like that. It was just just people that he asked, and then one guy they interviewed a chick, and that went awkward at best.
Yeah.
But she ended up being the human sacrifice character.
Yeah, well, she literally was a sacrifice because the devil-worshipping spirits in the hotel took advantage of the fact that she was tied up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everybody else that got locked up in the basement got sacrificed too.
Yeah.
So, there's that. A lot of the people ended up getting out of the house, and some of the people ended up making their way to the attic thinking they would be safe, and
I never understood running up to an attic, though. Like, I hate the concept of when people run upstairs. It's like, you understand you're trapped at that point, unless there's a fire escape.
Right. So, later in the movie, you see Sarah talking to the journalist. She gives her all of this information. She basically just gives her a rundown of what happened.
But she's aloft the entire time. She's just...
Right. She just basically tells her, you have the footage. Look at it. Asked her if she's gone to the house. And the journalist says, no, we can't get into the house. And she says, well, you should try again. You should go to the house. You should try to get in again. And Sarah says, I'm tired. I think I'm going to go back to my room. And she tells the journalist that she's staying in room 2C. So she encourages the journalist, like I said, to go back to the haunted house and see for herself.
So this journalist, I really think that she's either just right out of college or she's young and this is her first big scoop. But
no, she's just a whore for, getting her name out there.
Well, but
she's a journalist. This is what journalists do.
But it seems like she's like a clickbait journalist.
I don't know. But, so she tells her she's in room 2C. And I guess the journalist just naturally assumes that she is staying in the hotel that they're currently at. Because I guess that's where the journalist is staying.
Well, no, I think it looks like it's a relatively small town, so it might be that might be the only hotel.
The only working hotel, yeah. So the journalist goes to the front desk after Sarah leaves, and she says, she asked her where room 2C is, and the journalist says, we don't have any rooms that have letters in them. And she says, well, that must be a mistake. Well, can you tell me what room Sarah, and she gives her last name, and she says, okay, and she, types in the computer and says, we don't have anybody staying here by that name.
And then the camera guy is like, she must be using an alias.
She must be using a different name.
Yeah, because she's such a celebrity.
Yeah. He didn't use the word alias. He just said different name. So they decide to go on to the haunted house or haunted hotel. And,
not much has changed.
No.
Since that fateful night. And they're walking through and they're showing clips of like what happened.
Yeah, she goes inside and she goes, oh, this is where this happened and that's where that happened. And she's getting all cranked up. And she really wants to go into the kitchen, but they can't find a way in there. And she goes upstairs and they top the stairs and they see a door that says 2C on it.
So this is another thing that, just a little thing that really bothered me. Really bothered me. I don't know why. But if you look at the door design, it has one of those the metal hook things. Mm-hmm. You know, and it has the eyelet or whatever. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
And on the outside of the door as the locking mechanism. So I'm trying to figure that out in logistical terms. How that would help if you're inside the room.
It's for if you have small children or something and you want to lock the door to keep them from going in.
Okay. I guess that's a reasonable explanation.
Okay, so the journalist sees this and she says, do you think this is the room she was talking about? And the cameraman goes, surely not. But she just can't. The curiosity is killing her and she can't help herself, so she politely knocks. And I'm like, really? Really?
Yeah.
And then goes inside. What does she see? Sarah is sitting on the bed. So she says, Sarah, are you okay? So Sarah turns around. The journalist about has a conniption fit because you can see Sarah's face is bashed in and bloody. And then you see all of the nice, sweet, hooded figures surrounding her. And then they go in attack mode. And the journalist and her cameraman can't run fast enough.
And the door closes and...
But unfortunately, they just don't manage to escape. And the spirits get exactly what they want.
Yeah. So, this one... and then they showed the end of it where Sarah dies by Paul's hand. He bashes her skull in and then cuts his own throat. So this is where I think he was, after he went into the oven, the furnace, he got possessed by one of the beings.
When did Paul go into the furnace?
You said?
Paul was not in the furnace. Alex and Tracy went into the furnace to get away from what they thought was crazy clowns. When they came out, Paul was sitting on the floor of the basement.
Okay. So, maybe...
Paul was attacked by a ghost or spirit.
So...
And then, they found him possessed, and he wasn't himself.
So, okay. So, that's probably when he got possessed, when he got attacked.
Right.
And he was asleep and blah, 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 blah.
He slept for like 2 days.
Yeah, and then he gets up and slashes his own throat, and that's why he was possessed, in my opinion, because why would you do that to yourself? So,
Yeah, why would he... He really liked Sarah. I mean, you can watch... It shows previously in the video where he always gives her a hard time, and he's always videotaping her, and, he treats her like a big brother would, basically. So I would see no reason why he would want to bludgeon her to death. And then he turns and gets a blade and cuts his own throat open. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see how anybody could do that unless they were possessed or something. You know, most people would cut their wrists, not cut their stuff from ear to ear.
Yeah, and so the second time around to me makes this movie a lot better because of the little interactions you didn't notice the first time because you just want to know what happens.
Right.
Shows you that they all died, you know, like there's no hint of, you know, one of them might be alive or whatever. It tells you right there and then all of them died, you know, and stuff like that. So you're trying to figure out how they died. Mm-hmm. So the second time around, you see Sarah, and she's wearing the same clothes.
Right.
Which is like this t-shirt and shorts.
There's blue jeans and like a gray colored t-shirt.
And a necklace.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't... So, and I think the interview is like a couple of days in between. She never changes the outfit.
No, the interview with the journalist is 5 years later.
It's 5 years later, but I thought it was like 1 or 2 days.
I don't know.
But...
It doesn't really explain that, I don't think.
But either way...
Well, they said that there was one survivor of the workers, and that was Joey. And he ends up, a few days after the event, hanging himself.
Yeah.
So ultimately, none of the actual workers of the haunted house survived.
Yeah.
They all died.
So, I mean, I thought that was interesting. And then you start noticing, like, stuff in the background going on. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like little things in the background that go on, and you're like, okay, things are starting to get weird in this house.
Yeah.
And if you haven't watched it or just watched it once, I would suggest going back and watching it a second time.
Yeah, because there's a lot of little finite details that you notice multiple times that you watch it. So it's definitely one of those that you can watch multiple times, and you have to pay attention.
Yes.
So what do you rate the kills at?
I didn't even do the rating. I know.
Oh, no.
So let's go through them.
So what kills do you see?
Well, I see Sarah's at the end.
Yeah.
And you see Paul's at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that pretty much it, though? Like...
Yeah, the ones in the basement, they shut the basement door and you don't see the cameraman or the journalist die. You don't see the ones in the attic per se.
Yeah.
You see the feet of the people when they hang them. That's it.
Yeah. Because the last owner hung himself in the attic, so that's, I guess, his MO for if you go up to the attic, you will be hung.
No, he didn't hang himself in the attic. He hung himself in the dining room.
So why is there hanging in the attic?
How else would you kill anybody in that attic? I mean, you have huge rafters.
I guess. But you just see feet dangling.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of mental deaths, but there's not a lot of physical deaths. So here's another interesting...
There is a lot of physical deaths, but you just don't see them.
Well,
see
what I
death.
mean, like, mental, you fill in the blanks mental. You know, like, you don't see them killing themselves. So I think the Sarah one would be a 4, just because by who did it. You know, like, and it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
And it was sort of interesting because he brutally killed her, and then Paul slashed his own throat, and I give that a 4-2 because
he sat down beside her body and did it.
Yeah, and then after that, her body gets drug off, and you see, like, you know, like when they come into the house or whatever, you see the blood splatter where she would have been, and you see a trail going off into the wall.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, I mean, really isn't a lot of...
Yeah, the other ones you really don't see.
But, I mean...
You know they happen, but you don't witness the actual act.
So, what little things bothered you about it?
I think the scene where they tested out the lights and things in the hall was very difficult to see, and we watched it like 3 times, and we've watched that scene about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, we've had to rewind it several.
And still, it's difficult to discern how many creatures are in that hallway. That scene, I find infuriating because the dude's totally freaking out. And it's still hard to discern how many creatures are in that scene. I want to feel for him. I want to freak out too, but...
So I wonder if his followers also hung themselves or killed themselves in that house. Because it's not just the owner. It's a ghost. It's several other...
No, there's like 7 of them.
So I'm assuming, like...
There's a cult.
Yeah, so I'm assuming they all sort of killed themselves in there. So their souls would be trapped.
Oh, it makes sense.
It's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, if they make another one, I hope they give more background, because the very little background is given.
Yeah. So, other than, like, the chick's hand being over her head, which really bothered me, because I'm just... doesn't make any sense. I mean, having one... What if that guy... I don't know. What was something happened to that guy? Or what if she didn't communicate that she was going to have... Her arms were tired. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just... The hands over the head thing bothered me because it's just like so many things could go wrong with that.
Right.
And then there really was... I just felt like some of it was very boring. Like, I just started losing interest after, I think, the 3rd time we watched it. I just really lost interest in it. It's like twice as interesting. The 3rd time, you're starting to get like, okay.
So what's your overall rating?
I go to 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I was gonna do 3 out of 5.
And it had a lot of potential. It was just, it felt like it was missing something.
Yeah.
I would like to have more stuff in the background. Like progressively things get really weird, but not in like, boo, ha ha ha. But like, I like the subtlety of it. I really do.
Yeah.
And I wish there was more subtlety. Like maybe we see more of the real figures throughout as that night progresses.
Yeah, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to see all of these random items come to life, and then on the night when the haunted house opens, you see these hooded figures and people die.
Yeah, I would like to have seen like...
How do you make that connection of inanimate objects come to life to hooded figures?
I would like to have seen that... I'm going to call him Cry-y Clown, or Milty Face Clown, or whatever. The main clown guy. I'd like to have seen him come to... Like, not him jump up and run, like Joey... Or Joey runs out, whatever. I'd like to have seen him jump up and run. Because, they made a point that Joey is the only clown in there that should be moving. To the chick. The chick doesn't know anything else that is going on. So I like to have seen maybe him get up and maybe...
But that's one thing that doesn't make sense. During this whole time, they had inanimate objects coming to life, and then the night when everybody dies, these hooded figures come in and kill everybody.
But that's what I was saying, maybe the clown Milty-faced clown would have popped up and killed her instead of a
hooded figure.
A hooded figure, because it's been playing off that bloody clown the entire movie.
Right.
And, and maybe some of the other clowns started moving and creeping and stuff, instead of the hooded figures. You can still have like 1 or 2 hooded figures in there, but have the inanimate objects be sort of like the front of it because of...
But what is the point of the hooded figures if they can manipulate inanimate objects?
Exactly. There is no reason for the hooded figures, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe like...
I don't understand the necessity of both.
And maybe
the hooded figures need to be themselves in order to, absorb the powers of the individual or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
because
none of that's explained.
because it seems like the whole.
I don't like movies that don't
Yeah.
answer questions.
I feel like the whole within the movie.
Not that it was a bad movie. It's not
No.
a bad movie, but
Maybe the whole. I have a theory that the whole MO of the house itself is to suck people into said house to kill them because it needs some sort of energy to survive.
all right, well, that makes sense.
So maybe from like day one when the guy came and was looking for the hotel, he was like, maybe he wasn't half working with his brain. He didn't want to tell everybody, not because he didn't want to tell everybody what it was, but maybe he wasn't allowed to because he was halfly possessed. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, the spirits didn't want him to say it, so he forgot about it, let's say. Till things started going haywire.
But one of the partners knew about it.
I don't know. I mean,
I think that was part of what was explained to the guy to Alex. Tracy knew about it.
yeah. And then, like bringing in the cameraman and the reporter into the house. Because they were so fascinated, and Sarah brought him in to with the whole like 2C thing.
Mm-hmm.
If she'd never mentioned 2C, they would have never have gone into that room where
Right.
it would have just been like whatever type thing. Overall, it's an interesting movie.
Well, I think you guys should definitely give it a try and see what you think.
Yeah.
It is a good movie, even though, we sometimes make things sound bad because we pick them apart and dissect them, and we do find things that we don't care for. We feel like they could be better, but
Well, I mean, overall,
when you pick things apart, that happens.
Overall, it had. I think it had a lot of potential, and I think overall it was good. It is a very independent film, so I think it has a very short budget.
Yeah.
So, I think that's it for this one. So we've got one more.
One more.
So
So close.
Yeah, so spook you later.
Bye.